Welcome to Mama Mandala, where magic is somatic. I'm Hagar. I'm so grateful to have this moment with you to explore the way that our patterns become our home. That when we move our bodies in a certain way, we're going to give our bodies a certain kind of shape. A repetitive movement in our bodies creates a certain kind of shape in our bodies. The kind of movement that we are creating in our minds, the thoughts that repeat themselves over and over again create a groove, and they become how we view ourselves and how we view the world, and they influence how we feel about ourselves, and they affect how the actions that we take. Now, before we go further with that, I just want to point out and let us think about this for a moment, that in New Age spirituality, we talk about this a lot, right? About how much power you have over your reality, and your patterns really influence and affect your reality and how you're living. And that is true, but it's true to a certain degree. And I want to emphasize this. It's not the point of the video, but it's something I want us to bring in from the get-go and weave into the conversation, because I think it's really important. You don't have that much power. You have a lot of power, but you're also born to a certain kind of body. You have a body type that you're born into, and within that body type, you have the power to affect the shape of your body. But there's going to be hormones, and there's going to be nervous system influences, and there's going to be things that you are not choosing that have effect on how your body is. Not everything is in your power. In your mind, there's patterns that you create, and with them you shape your life, but it's not everything. There's other forces. It's not that if you are 100% calling in the reality that you want, that's going to be the reality you live. Life is not so simple. The universe is much more complex. There are way more threads to this, all of this creative world that we live in, than just what you bring to the table. But that being said, it doesn't mean that what you bring to the table isn't important. You have agency and you have responsibility. So how we show up matters a lot. I'll give the simplest example right now. This is my 567 take of trying to make this video. It just wasn't clicking until now. Hopefully this one will. But when something doesn't click, and then you try it again, and you stop and you try again, and you stop and you try again, and you tell yourself, it's not working today. This is really hard today. I start to feel how it's not working. And I start to really fall into that groove of feeling like this is not working. And guess what? More takes, because I have to try again, because it's really not working, because I'm bringing again, this is sounds a little bit new agey, so excuse me for saying it this way. I'm not crazy about it, but the energy that I bring to it really affects how it's going. So what I did before this take, and hopefully this is it, is that I turned myself upside down. I did a handstand, and I stood upside down, and I let the blood flow into my head, and I shifted perspective. I shifted the situation I was in. I literally shifted my physical experience, and then try again. Because sometimes to break a habit, what we need to do is create a somatic repatterning. Like, just to break what you're doing, break the sitting. I was sitting to record this video and trying again and trying again. It wasn't working. Boom. Turn myself upside down, shift the perspective, change the shape, change the experience, and then try again. So that's just one example, and we'll come back to it toward the end about what the things that we can do in order to break some of the unhelpful pattern. By the way, this video is inspired by a comment somebody left me on another video, and I'm so grateful for that. And she brought these questions that I thought would be helpful. I started to write a response, and then I decided to make this video because I thought this is very human, and a lot of us can relate to it, and a lot of us can explore it, and a lot of us can consider how we're building a home for ourselves by the repetition of what we're doing, of how we're moving, of how we're thinking, and how we're able to shift how we're feeling about ourselves by bringing different perspectives, different views, different ways of thinking, different directions that our minds can take, different stories that we can tell ourselves. Our patterns build us, and our patterns can also imprison us. There can be patterns that are helpful, and there can be patterns that are harmful. In the scope of this video, I'm really going to speak more about the patterns in our own selves and in our own lives, and bring it a little bit less into the collective, because I could be here all day talking about how our own patterns and our own ways of thinking can affect and influence something greater than us, and it does, and it always does. There's always a relationship between the world around us and the world inside of us, right? And that's why in New Age spirituality, this idea that everything that you think is what's going to come back to you. Let's be careful with that, right? There's so much more to life than just our own way of being, because we create a world and we create a self that is made by a world that's created us already. It doesn't mean that we're not powerful and that we don't have agency. We have agency and we have responsibility. Again, I'll say that again, and I'll say that again and again. And we're part of something greater that breathes us. The world is breathing us alive. And in order to create the life that we want to live, we need repetition. We need to show up to the groove that takes us in the direction that we want to go. And we need to travel that road again and again and again, so that we can become more familiar with that road, so that road can start to become who we are, the home that we are for ourselves, right? Repetition is really the key here. Patterns, grooves, habits. Our creativity needs a familiar road to travel in. So when we want to create something, we need to actually show up, even if the creative juices aren't flowing. So we'll turn our view for a moment toward a creative practice, a creative life. If you want your muse to show up, listen, sometimes she shows up in the middle of driving, and if you can't really pull over and write down the idea or record it, then it might just disappear. It happens to me a lot. I'm like, okay, when I get there, I'm going to write it down, and then I get there and I don't remember what it was anymore. And it was this great idea, right? So that happens sometimes. Our muse shows up. She doesn't care at all about how convenient it is for us in that moment. But something incredible happens when we have a pattern in our lives where we create a certain kind of time and place to show up for a date with our muse. And sometimes she's going to show up, and sometimes she's not going to show up. Sometimes the inspiration will hit in that time and place, and sometimes it won't. But at least our system, our bodies know that when we arrive in that time, in that place, and we're ready for it, it can come. There's, again, this sense of welcoming that we create for our own creativity. And when we do something again and again and again, that can also, this is when a pattern can become a little bit of a problematic, that can create a bit of a stuckness. When you do the same creative practice over and over again, it can be really great for a while, and then it starts to dry up. And the creative juices need a different groove to travel through, a different way of being. It needs renewal. The key is that what we are moving through again and again and again needs to be something that is nourishing and that's building, right? Because that it's a home. So is the home a nurturing home? Or is the home feeling more like a prison? Like, wow, you're stuck in this. Because sometimes this will just add a little bit of complexity. Sometimes what feels safe, and we really need safety, and this is where patterns become, this is where what's helpful and also what's not, because sometimes our patterns that we kind of, the grooves that we travel through over and over again, they can be this feeling of safety, even though it's something that's not so good for us. Does that make sense? Like if my system is already is really used to me beating myself up over and over again after everything that I do, then I start to become more comfortable with beating myself up. I'm used to it. I expect that from myself. And then I keep doing it because that's what makes me feel safe, because I'm used to it. Is that good for me? No. But that's a pattern that I'm used to, so I'm doing it over and over again. Thankfully, mostly, it's a pattern that I've had for a very, very long time. I did use something actually personal right now. I've shifted so much. I did so much work on myself and still doing. I shouldn't say did. I should say do. I'm doing work on myself over and over again because life is sporadic. So the patterns that you've had, even when you think you've overcome them, you've directed the flow of energy. If something is familiar and you've had it from early on, your life will find a way to travel through that familiar path again, because life is sporadic and cyclical. So when we revisit a pattern that is not helpful, we are sometimes, it's really interesting. It's either shocking, like how is that here again? Or we don't even notice, oh, we're doing it again, right? So how do you become aware that you have an unhealthy, unhelpful pattern? You become aware of it because you're starting to see and feel stuck in it. You're starting to notice, oh, I'm stuck in this pattern. Whenever we feel stuck, it's an invitation to start to shift something. You feel that a pattern is not good for you when you're physically starting to notice that when that thought pattern comes on, you're not feeling good. Another example, when you have a thought pattern that's associated with a certain relationship, with a certain person in your life, with certain people in your life, and those thoughts are repetitive, you think about that person and it triggers a certain kind of reaction, and you start to think about it a lot, and you start to have a certain kind of energy around it and a certain kind of feeling with it. And you start to feel your heart rate going up and your body. I'm bringing that example and I can feel it. Your body starts to tighten. Certain muscle groups tighten. Your jaw tightens. When you start to feel your body creating tension in response to a thought pattern, you know that it's a problematic one. You know that this is something you want to break. And how do you break it? There's a lot of different ways to break it, right? There's my favorite, and this is really my life's work, is to give my body something else to do. Because if I notice that the pattern is problematic through my heart rate going up, I feel dysregulated, my nervous system is dysregulated, I feel like it's difficult to focus, I'm starting to kind of feel all over the place. See, like that is a whole like chain of reactions, right? Because it's like nervous system, and then it's hormonal. There's a lot of things that are happening in the body when a certain thought pattern is not so great for us. When you start to notice that happen, a somatic cue can be really helpful. For me, when I have that kind of experience, when a thought pattern comes up and I start to feel my heart rate going up and like my whole system tightening, I take a deep breath into my belly. I make my belly really big. This is a very traditional nervous system work. It affects the vagal nerve. The whole the autonomic nervous system is affected by deep breathing into the belly. The vagus nerve has a lot of branches in the gut. So you breathe into your belly. It massages the branches of the vagus nerve. And you breathe out and you let your belly relax. And you do that a few times until you start to feel a little bit more regulated. That's one way. Another way, when you start to feel a thought pattern over and over again, oh, this is not going well, like what I had earlier, move your body, turn it upside down if you can. You don't have to do handstand or headstand, by the way, if that's not something that you do. You can just fold forward over your legs, stand up tall and fold forward, and let the crown of the head reach toward the floor. Let your head bow, even just what I'm doing now, just letting the head bow. And breathing slowly. You can move your head a little side to side. You can roll your neck. So any movement that you introduce into your body in a moment when you catch a pattern that isn't helpful can be very supportive. Can help you, again, regulate a system that feels dysregulated. You notice that a pattern is not great when you feel like there's no way out. When you start to think and feel like you're stuck, you're imprisoned, there's no way out, there's no other way, that's the only way, you know that you're in a pattern that's not necessarily so good for you. And a way to shift it, if the physical isn't speaking to you, another way to shift our patterns when we find that our pattern is not one that's healthy and nourishing for us, is to bring another piece into the conversation. When you hear yourself saying this thing over and over again, you're kind of stuck in this one way of thinking about it. You can pause and you can, again, for me, it's always about bringing a little bit of a deeper breath into the moment. It's always physical. And then you can ask yourself, what else can be true about this situation, about this moment? What else can I bring into this conversation? So an antidote to a pattern that isn't helpful is to think about it, to bring another point of view. What else is true? This, again, this video is, I thought of making it because of a comment somebody left with a question. And in that video where that comment landed, I was talking about how the grooves that we have, the patterns that we have are within a rock, right? The rock of our lives. And those patterns are created because water is flowing down that rock in that particular pattern, because water has already flowed down that particular groove. So it's going down that familiar pathway. And one thing that I find helpful is to remember, oh, this road is a part of a rock, and that rock is a part of a mountain. There's always a more broad way, a more broad context that we can weave the moment into. So if you feel like, oh, you're stuck and this is just this way, you can respond with a different story. What else can I bring into this conversation? What else is true about this? What else is here for me? What else and what can be helpful? What can be helpful right now? If you were a little child and this pattern was a part of a little child, what would you say when you look at it from an adult perspective to this child that is struggling in that moment? So one thing that I find helpful is that when I find that I'm in a pattern that isn't helpful for me, when I feel shit about myself, because so that's another way of knowing that you are in a pattern that's not helpful for you is when you feel like shit about yourself. So it's when you feel like you recognize that your body is feeling off and makes you feel dysregulated. It's when a thought pattern starts to make you feel so irritated, right? When you start to kind of feel like your whole body is heated from it. When you have this stuckness, when you feel like there's no other way. And also when you feel like shit about yourself. This way of living doesn't make you feel good about yourself. You're seeing a certain thing over and over again, showing up no matter what you do. It's creating this, and you're not, and this makes you feel really crappy. And what you hear yourself say to yourself in those moments are not really helpful things. You say to yourself things that make you feel even shittier. Like again, like in a very simple way, what happened to me before this video. Trying again, I'm like, it's not working, and then my energy gets aggravated by how it's not working, and then I tell myself, oh, why is it so hard today? And then I say, oh wow, like you're really not doing great today, and you start to feel like shit, and you create more of that shitty feeling the more you show up to that. And at this point I do want to bring up this other, again, like in resistance to new age spiritual bullshit, that I don't want us to bypass how we feel. So this is so important. I probably should have kind of brought that up earlier in the video, but not bypassing our feelings is really important. So if you feel like shit, before you start to shift anything, you have to acknowledge that you feel like shit. And you have to tend to that part of yourself, which then brings me to how we break a pattern in yet another way, is that when you're showing up, when you realize that there's a groove here that you're traveling down and it's not helpful, you show up to it, and you show up to it with a supportive presence. That can start to shift things in a very beautiful and soft and tender kind of a way. Are you able to be tender with yourself? I want to say loving, and I want to honor those of us who are not in a place where we can be loving with ourselves. We can't always be loving with it. Not all of us can always be loving with ourselves. Not all of us are there right now at this moment and this juncture. Maybe it's just being tender, bringing tenderness. Because sometimes a pattern, when you show up to it and you go, okay, I feel like shit. Okay, I'm acknowledging it. I'm really not feeling great. And I'm going to be with myself in this place. And I'm going to let myself feel the feeling with tenderness. I'm going to breathe into it. And then I can ask this pattern, what have you got from me? What do you have to say to me? Why are you here? Is there anything you want to share with me? And you listen to what the pattern starts to say. Because once you start to ask it and tend to it in this way, it might start to dissolve some of the buildup of this energetic repetition, and it starts to show us something deeper. Not always, but sometimes. When you show up with tenderness to yourself, that can be a beautiful way to start to redirect the energy, because the energy that you bring to it is different than it itself. When I come into the conversation with my pattern and my energy is the energy of the pattern, I'm not breaking anything. I'm not redirecting the flow. It's the same thing. I'm emphasizing the groove. But if I show up to it with tenderness, then I'm creating a different groove. And again, the energy, the flow, the substance that needs to move starts to move through a different groove. Instead of moving through the groove of feeling like shit about myself, it starts to move through the groove of my tenderness with myself. And that creates a different result. That brings us somewhere else, right? So repatterning our system isn't about not having patterns. It's about choosing the pattern that is the home that we want to live in. Choosing the structure that we want to move through. So you can move your body in a different way. You can do some cat and cow in your spine. Just a little undulation in the spine that helps to regulate the nervous system too. You can bring breath. You can repattern with breathing. I'll make sure I link to a different video of a breath work that helps to repattern, that helps you kind of break the pattern of breathing, and through that repattern your system. It helps me so much. That's something I do a lot. This particular pranayama, Viloma pranayama, I do that a lot with a certain kind of thought process, right? I think about how, like, it's such a fine line sometimes between really acknowledging how we're feeling and being with ourselves and how we're feeling, and wallowing in it and starting to create a groove with it. And it's a really fine line, and it's not always easy. So it's not like I'm not giving you right now the secrets of the universe. I'm just giving us some things to think about, some things to notice, some things to contemplate and ponder in how we're being with ourselves. In the last few days, for a lot of reasons that I'm not going to get into, I've been feeling sad, just like this, just a little melancholic, just a feeling of sadness. And I find that the more I say to myself that I'm sad, the more I'm emphasizing the sadness. But if I ignore the sadness and I tell myself there's nothing to be sad about, let's move on, there's a dissonance that isn't helpful. So I have to give myself space to be in the feeling, to acknowledge it, to tell myself, it's okay, whatever you're feeling right now. The tears come, I let them flow. I put right now, I notice it. So again, we're somatic beings. Our bodies respond. So my hand went to my belly. You can put a hand on your belly and a hand to the heart, and just give yourself permission to be with yourself and how you're feeling. Showing up with tenderness. And then from there, things can shift. So I'm not just like, I'm so sad. Oh my gosh, I'm so sad. Why am I so sad? I shouldn't be sad. One is like getting the groove of sadness deeper. One is like fighting with the groove. That also creates stuckness. And the other is like, it's tenderness. And I don't know, tenderness might not work for you. For me, it really works. When I'm showing up to myself with a softness and an understanding and a receptivity, then I can move from there. And then I can ask myself when there's a pattern that I find isn't helpful. Again, it's not. It's not helpful when your body is in a reactive state. when it's dysregulated, when you feel like shit about yourself, right? When you, I'm looking at my notes because I wrote all these things down for myself. But when you are feeling like shit about yourself, when you're feeling stuck, when you feel like you're not moving, like that's the only way, and when your body is tightening. Those are some ways. They're not the only ways that you can recognize that you are in a pattern that's not healthy for you. It's just how those are the things that I think about, and I actually would love to know how else how do you recognize that you're in a pattern that's not helpful for you? And you can leave that in the comments, and I would love to read it, and I would love to know and be in conversation with you. Again, like this video is made because someone asked me a question in the comment. I actually really value and feel so honored to be in conversation with you. So feel free to write in the comments how you recognize when you're in an unhealthy habit. And when you're in an unhealthy pattern, there's the somatic way of recreating another groove, another pathway, just doing something physical that breaks the groove. So like, again, sometimes I'm just like, I shake my butt, I jump up and down, I go upside down. There's different ways that we can do it. Really, any movement, shaking the wrists a little bit. There's the responding with the different stories and asking ourselves what else is true. There's showing up with tenderness and asking the pattern what it wants to tell us and what it's here for. And often we're going to find out that the pattern is created because we want to protect ourselves from something. We want to protect ourselves. We want to keep ourselves safe. And then another way of breaking the pattern is asking ourselves, where do I actually want to go? What do I actually want to accomplish? What do I want to create? And when you ask yourself that, you can then ask, well, what's one little thing that I can take action with today? Not how do I get there, but what's one thing that I can do today and maybe tomorrow that is going to, slowly take me on my road to where I want to go. And we might discover that that's not necessarily how we've been patterning the road, right? You can ask yourself, what would be supportive for me on this journey where I want to go? And you can journal about it. So that's a great way of breaking out of patterns is journaling, because when you journal and you write with your hands and with a pen and a piece of paper, you don't even have to read it, but you start to notice what comes through. And it, for lack of a better word, it helps to kind of wash out some of the gunk that gets stuck in us. So that's another thing that I didn't even think about when I was preparing for this. But journaling can be really helpful for breaking patterns. And sometimes I feel like, I don't have time for it. But if I take 5 minutes and I write some things down, it really, really helps, right? So to get things out of the way and to ask ourselves what is helpful, what is supportive of me right now and of my way. That can be really helpful. Okay, I can be here all day and keep thinking with you. And so I would love to know, what did I not mention that is a way for you to recognize that you're in a pattern that's not helpful, not healthy for you? And what are your way of repatterning? If I didn't mention it, if it's not a somatic thing, it's not a different kind of a story, it's not showing up with a different energy to the pattern, and if it's not really asking yourself where you want to go and starting to figuring out what's supportive along the path, what are other ways for you to find a new way, to create a new path forward? I would love, love, love to know. And this is a way for you to actually become really supportive and helpful for others. And it's a way for us to feel a little bit like we're in a community together, in this together. I think it's a great way. Connecting to each other in the comments would be wonderful. So I'd love to hear from you. And I have so many more ideas and so many more things that we can keep exploring. So we will do that soon. I'm so grateful for you. Thank you so much for being here. And if you want an entire process and with practices that are going to help you repattern by creating a temple around where you actually are, a temple for the condition that you're in, really wrapping yourself in a sacred, in sacred garments, so that you can start to build or map your way to in the direction that you want to take, as you create and build a sanctuary for inspiration and letting yourself really be guided by the muse, by your creativity. I have a program for you. I'll leave a link in the description of the video. It's called From Stillness to Spark. And it's 5 sessions of creating a sanctuary for your muse and a sanctuary, a sacred space for where you are, so that where you are and the energy of inspiration can meet and guide you toward where you want to go in a very gentle and slow way. There's somatic practices and a little bit of a mythic lens, and I think you would love it. I priced it pretty low. It's pretty affordable, so because I want it to be accessible. So I'll leave a link for you in the description of this video. And if you're not subscribed to this channel, please subscribe to this channel. I'll be so honored and grateful to be in this space with you again. Put a like on this video if you liked it. Share it with your people. And I cannot wait to see you next time. Thank you so, so much. Namaste.